This is an examination of the hidden human condition.
This is the Hidden Killers Podcast.
With Tony Brueski.
Talking about Bryan Kohberger right now with attorney Eric Faddis, former felony prosecutor, discussing the definition of, or what has been given as, Kohberger's alibi. Again, I say it with air quotes because it's kind of what I joked about last week, saying, what is his alibi going to be? He just likes to drive around at night in the area. Well, surprise, that's what the alibi ended up being. This is kind of mind-boggling. A lot of people initially saying, Ann Taylor, she really seems to have a strategy going here. And maybe she does, but ultimately she has to follow what her client wants to do. Is her work really cut out for her right now? Do you think that alibi, there's any strategy to it? Is this something that you would think his defense attorney is saying, yeah, this is a good one, let's run with it? Or is it more so, I have no choice, this is what my client wants to say?
Yeah, it's I think it's kind of this attempt to sort of preserve the ability to run an alibi later, even though we don't really have the concrete facts supporting it now. Mm-hmm. That's what I think. It's almost like a placeholder a little bit. And you see that in civil practice a lot. Defense attorneys will say, maybe plaintiff failed to mitigate their damage. Maybe they were comparatively at fault. And we just want to save all those defenses so we can run them later when we have more information. That's just how the alibi struck me. They don't identify any witnesses who can support his version. Mm-hmm. He's out, driving around. And, the fact that he's out driving around in the middle of the night. And allegedly a vehicle that looks like his was seen near the quadruple murder scene. That's not helpful. So, I think it's kind of a placeholder at this point, and I'm not sure how much they have to back it up.
With that being a placeholder, if that's what it is, and they come up with a more detailed alibi, help me understand the legal maneuvering of this. Is that something, the extra information, should they come up with it, will that have to be revealed in discovery prior to the trial actually starting? Or can they pull something out of their ass at the last minute when this thing is in trial and present it? Wouldn't that have to go back and forth with discovery or be admitted so the defense can review it with ample time? Or the prosecution can review it with ample time?
Right. Yeah. So different jurisdictions have different rules on this, but generally speaking, the defense doesn't have to give up very much at all in terms of their strategy. But if they bring an alibi, they usually have to identify witnesses who can support that alibi and disclose the basic facts underlying the alibi defense. An alibi is essentially saying, I wasn't at this crime scene, I was somewhere else. And so usually they have to give up something. There can't be a trial by ambush that goes for the defendant, but it also goes for the government. That they can't be ambushed in trial with a completely new set of facts coming out of left field that they've never heard about in the alibi context, especially. Mm-hmm. So, I think if defense is going to run this, they're going to have to kind of back it up, and that hasn't happened yet.
What was the delay, do you think, in coming out with this alibi? We heard that first statement that was made that was kind of alluding to maybe they'll have an alibi. It really wasn't a true alibi that was filed. And then a few days later, they came out basically saying something just as generic. What would be the reasoning in waiting to say what they said by just a few days after that first filing?
A bit of a head scratcher. I'm just wondering if they thought, hey, we got to file this potential alibi by the deadline, so let's get it filed. Yeah. And then we can continue to develop, and maybe we'll get a miracle within the next week. Oh, we didn't get a miracle. So let's, give them a little more so that they don't completely prohibit us from running an alibi. Yeah. I'm just wondering if it's slow playing while they're sort of scrambling to try and find something to support it.
Sure. Just basically putting a placeholder in there temporarily. Let's talk about the actual the defense. If this makes it to court, obviously it's on the docket. I'm always surprised by this case. I wouldn't be surprised if something dramatic happened between now and then, and this thing never gets to trial. But let's assume it does. Given his background in criminology, do you think that that's going to play a role in this case? In either his defense in some way, shape, or form, talking about his knowledge and this or that, and why would he do something like this when he already knows how these things work? It would be asinine. He he's more intelligent than that, essentially, or something that could be used by the prosecution as well to go, he's as intelligent as that, and he knows how this system works.
Yeah, I think the latter is more likely. One thing, when you have a client in criminal defense, often they're a great source of information in terms of helping to structure the defense and what it's going to look like and how you execute it. Here we have someone who is trained in this. He's got a background. He essentially has more information than most about how the criminal justice system works. Mm-hmm. And so I think it's going to aid him in terms of constructing that defense and defending against this case. Will the prosecution jump on it and say, hey, look, the reason we can't find the murder weapon, for example, is because the defendant who did this is schooled in criminology and knows that that's a critical piece in a murder case, and has or suggests that the defendant has actively withheld that if they have the grounds to suggest that. So I think it's going to cut both ways.
This is an examination of the hidden human condition
This is the Hidden Killers Podcast
with Tony Brueski.